It seemed like a good idea last night to go last. I'd like to rethink that. I'm Rod Coleman. I have been pastor of Shepherd of the Hills Christian Church, one of the sister churches, for 30 years. During most of that time, actually doing all of that time, I was also either in the National Guard, Reserve, or active duty. Those three: National Guard, Reserve, or active duty. And therefore, I'm glad to be here. It allows me the opportunity to say to you, as a disciple congregation, thank you. I was endorsed by you. This is a part of my church, my endorsing body. I was trained by this church and others. I went to TCU, I went to Brite Divinity School, and I was endorsed to go into the military. And so it's been a major part of who I am, my life experience. And so I have to thank you. I've had some wonderful experiences as a chaplain. Not all of them were wonderful, but I have had some, and I wouldn't have had them had I not been a chaplain. I was enlisted in the Marine Corps at my own stupidity, but that's another story, for 3 years before going to Brite, and I graduated in '74 and then went into the Army for 3 years. 6 months of that time I spent in Germany with the battalion that was moved to Germany for 6 months. Spent that 3 years on active duty, got out, joined the National Guard, stayed in the National Guard for 24 years. To say that now, it seems like it went by pretty quickly. Became the state chaplain for Texas. The Army has a tendency of moving you up or moving you out. And I think, looking back on it, they determined that it was easier to move me up than to move me out. It took a lot less paperwork. And so they kept moving me to the next slot, and I did have the privilege of serving as the state chaplain for the Texas Army and Air Corps, the Guard units, for 7 years. And of course, this church was a part of being able to put me there, and so I do appreciate that. One of the really fun things that happened to me there is they sent me to the Czech Republic. Anybody been to the Czech Republic? It's a lovely place. Actually, it is gorgeous. The Guard decided, we have a relationship, Texas and the Czech Republic, a reciprocal relationship where after their Velvet Revolution, they're changing government and they're reclaiming a democracy. They sent soldiers over here, we sent soldiers there to help them. And so my role on your behalf was to go over and help the Czech Republic set up a chaplaincy within their military. What a cool deal. I was amazed that when I got there, the world being as small as it is, the Army commander that was in charge of that particular mission was one of my fraternity brothers from TCU. But I was honored to be there. It was a part of the task. Eventually, after I'd been at the state chaplain's position for 7 years, I moved to the reserves. As I say, I had 26 chaplains. Those were the ones I supervised. 26 chaplains praying for my early demise, because they couldn't get promoted until I moved. So I moved to 5th Army, which was down in San Antonio. 5th Army gave me technical oversight for all reserve chaplains and National Guard chaplains west of the Mississippi. The Army gives you these titles and responsibilities that wouldn't fit on a card. My role, that was in 2002, my role was to activate chaplains and to make sure that they were qualified and certified and ready to go downrange. There typically were levels of supervision between me and the person actually going. And eventually, I got a call from the chief's office saying, Rod, you've activated everybody we got. It's your turn. And so the church that I had founded and been at for about 20 years at the time, I went to tell them that I'd be taking a leave of absence or resigning. I actually turned in my letter of resignation, and they said, no, it'll take us a year to find somebody. Just go ahead and go and come back. I was with the 1st Infantry Division, the Army's 1st Division. I don't know if you're familiar with it. Wonderful history, Normandy and all of that. And I was the division rear chaplain, which is to say, we've got a division. The headquarters is in Germany. We have family members in 9 different cities scattered through Germany. We're sending 25,000 soldiers downrange. The chaplains from those 9 cities are going with them. We want you to keep up with the families. Still makes me smile. I ended up having 6 or 7 chaplains that worked with me, family life chaplain, Catholic chaplain, scattered amongst that. It would have been a lot easier to go downrange in many respects than to stay home with a lot of families that were suffering. They were in a foreign country. They weren't paid greatly. Their soldiers were in combat, and we would get a phone call about every 3 or 4 days that someone had been killed. And we would always get the phone call to let us be alert so that within the next few hours or a day, we would get the word of who it was. That wasn't helpful. That meant everybody worried during that period of time. During that year, we had 194 deaths. I attended 73, I was in charge of 73 funerals in Germany for soldiers that had died. So it's easy for me to talk about, the good things that the Army, positions that they put me in and allowed me to be in. It gets a little closer to home when you talk about some of the challenges because they were there too. We averaged, as it were, a funeral every week, and we all went. We never missed them. Our soldiers deserved the respect, the best respect that we could pay. One of the soldiers that we did a memorial service from graduated from Texas A&M, lived up near the city of West, had graduated in May, married in June, been activated with the National Guard in September, and was killed right after the first of the year, the following year. His wife and the daughter he had never met came to Germany for the memorial. Very sweet, very tender, and very painful. And it's not the kind that I talk about a whole lot now, just because it was very painful. But there's some real beauty in it too. When I was the division chaplain, I'll try not to get into the painful part because I can't quite spit it out sometimes. When I was the division chaplain, I was at chapel one Sunday. I was not preaching. I was sitting on about the third row where the chaplain sits. The division chaplain had come home on leave. He had 5 days that he was going to be in Germany with his wife. And we're sitting at chapel, and he leans over and backwards to me and says, "Rod, can you offer communion today?" And I say, "Yeah, Mike, I'm good. I'm a disciple. Ask me to give communion. I'm not even going to say, who's here? Who's up for it? I'm not even going to say, we got juice and crackers. If we're going to do communion, I'm good for it." Mike leaned back again and he said, "Thanks." He said, "My church won't allow me to give communion to the people that are giving their life downrange for our country." He said, "I really grieve that, and I really need to take communion, and you've got the privilege of inviting everybody." So we've got certainly the most equipped and the best army in the world, the military, and it's greatly, greatly challenged with multiple deployments. We've got soldiers down at Fort Hood that have been deployed during the 7th deployment. We've got a divorce rate in Bell County, which is Fort Hood, that runs 80%. We have suicide rate of, I think we're hovering around 22 a day, While we've been talking, some veteran has committed suicide somewhere in the United States. The challenges are huge. And we will talk a lot about, the invisible wounds of war. Let me suggest to you that on the other side of that yes, a lot of them are invisible. A lot of the physical wounds are invisible. The number one in the military is tinnitus. Number two is musculoskeletal injuries and pains, the constant pain. A lot of the mental injuries, the depression, the anxiety, the anger, a lot of those are invisible. The moral injuries, a lot of the spiritual are invisible. The existential angst and crisis and the identity of crisis of who am I now? On this side of that experience that I can't, quite deal with. A lot of that's invisible, but I would suggest that on the other side of that invisibility, you can see, the spinoff of that. You can see it in divorce, you can see it in suicide, you can see it in unemployment, you can see it in family violence, you can see it and we'll talk about, and have about the court system and the number of veterans that have gotten into minor skirmishes within the court system have caused many of our cities to set up veterans courts. It's just a part of the other side of the invisible wounds of war. So understand at some point somebody's going to turn off the microphone on me. And so let me at least spend a moment to say something. People will ask me, because I'm working at the Samaritan Counseling Center in Austin and work with Hope for Heroes and the counseling program that's there. And people will ask me related to the churches, what can we do? And so we'll talk about that, I know, in the next couple of days, but I jotted down a few notes for myself. One is recognize that redeployment is a process. Like Lisa, when I came home, I was at Fort Benning. I landed on Friday. I was supposed to be released on Sunday. The sergeant major came in and said, "Chaplain, nobody's going to be here on Sunday to take you to the airport. We'll get you out of here today if you want to go home." Okay, I'll miss some of those briefings about suicide and family stuff. And they sent me home on Friday night, and on Sunday morning, I was in my church, in my pulpit, preaching. The active duty, you have a guaranteed 6 months when you come back in for redeployment and for reintegration. If you're in the National Guard and the Reserves and recognize that's a little over 50% of our fighting force, you're cut loose within 2 or 3 days because you're on federal orders. They can't afford to pay for you on state orders. So recognize when you know folks that are in the military that redeployment takes a few minutes. I mean, it takes a few months. It takes a few days. It takes an adjustment. My number one suggestion for you on veterans that you know, I borrowed this from Mother Teresa. She was promoted. And somebody asked Mother Teresa one time, how can we help? She's in Calcutta working with the hardest of the hard, and she said, smile. Smile at your husband. Smile at your wife. Smile at your neighbor. Smile at your friends. Smile at those you don't even know. Add smile to the world. And so, what do you do with veterans when they come back? Smile. Welcome them back. Invite them to be involved with you. And I have to say then, do the best that you can to withhold judgment. I think there's a couple of pieces to that listening. Listening takes time and focus. But if you're going to listen to somebody's story, try to withhold judgment for them. Give them the benefit of the doubt. You don't know their culture. You don't know their choices. So give them space. Give them the benefit of the doubt. Try not to judge. And then I have to say, support organizations that support veterans. The Soul Repair Center, certainly worthy of your support. They didn't invite me, by the way, to give them a commercial. Military Veterans Peer Network, WAVE. Military Veterans Peer Network sets up peer groups of veterans for mutual support. critically important. We've got about 35, 40 different support groups around the state. And then a program that I'm suggesting, and I'll quit with that because I don't want Coleman in the back to have to wave at me too much. We've just pulled a group of folks together in Austin and decided, we would like to do something for veterans that's easy for the veteran and includes the churches and the religious organizations. So this is me inviting you to celebrate on November the 9th, Welcome Home Veterans Weekend in your church. We've put together a letter and a flyer, and we're inviting churches across the state to have some type of welcoming event within the church. It can be a prayer breakfast, it can be bowling, it can be a barbecue, it can be a worship service. Not only are we asking you to then invite veterans to that through the local veteran organizations, but we're also reminding you to include the veterans in your community in the leadership of that. If it's a worship service, let your veterans be the elders and the deacons and the worship leaders that day. It invites younger people to come to the church, and it keeps you as the welcoming community that you all know that you are. So I'm here for a couple days. Today and tomorrow I'm here for the whole duration. I'm glad to answer any questions. I think I've probably run up towards the end of our time. It's been an honor for me, frankly, to represent you as a chaplain in the military. Parts of it I've left out. It brings me to tears. Parts of it I can share with you easily. I don't mind the tears. But there are gaps in my life experience with my children that I can never regain. But I felt like I was doing a good thing, and I was doing it on behalf of our churches and on behalf of our faith and behalf of our country, and that's quite the honor. So thank you.